Hey, welcome back to True-Moto-Resto. While we're waiting for the replacement decals for the ones I messed up really bad on that thing, I've got another small project. Well, it's not a small project. It's going to be a pile of work. I've got some VF1000R bodywork that I'm going to work on for a friend of mine. Needs a lot of repairs and full paint job. So we'll show you how that gets along in the meantime. And then once we get the decals in, and I get somebody with some competency arranged to put them on, we'll get back to the ZX7. Stay tuned. Okay, so here's a selection of the bodywork for the VF1000R. So one bike, there's an upper fairing, a lower fairing, a fender. That's one of the little venting doors off the lower fairing. And then the tail section for that one is sitting up here. So this is likely broken, it's got tape on it. The mounting tab, the tabs for these are broken off. They're kind of sitting down there. That's broken off. There's missing mounting tabs, so the actual fairing part itself here is broken at the front. It is broken on that side at the front, and the all of the so these lugs here, these mounting tabs, they're only on the right side. They are completely missing from the left side, so they would have to be replaced. There's a pretty serious crack there in the tail section. And then the part that goes around the tail light is in two pieces. So that's a problem. That's got to get sorted out. And this extra tail section is even worse. Everything is missing off it. All of the mounting tabs are broken off. There's pieces missing here and there. That kind of fits in there. This whole section has snapped clean off, so that'll be interesting. The good news is the front mounting holes for this are intact, so I can actually use those to mold new ones for the other one. There's the top mounting lugs here are snapped, but there's some semblance of them there. The bottom ones are snapped clean off. They're gone. And then of course the section here in the middle that kind of is supposed to bridge across there, goes like that. That's gone. That's missing. So that'll be a challenge. And then this solo seat cover, that's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. I'm not sure what we're going to do with that. There's not much left. I mean, I can repair this, I'm sure. It can all be welded back together, or plastics repaired. That part shouldn't be a big deal. The part that becomes, I think, difficult here is getting a pattern for that, because I don't have another one here. So I might see if my buddy has, I know he has another one kicking around, so it would just be useful to have that. I should have thought of that when I picked it up, but I didn't. The front fender is not bad. It just needs to be sanded down. It's all in one piece. All right, let's take a look at the other bodywork here and see what it's going to need for repairs. So typical around the mirror area here. These things always kind of crack. This isn't as bad as some that I've seen, but this will all have to be cut away, ground back, and I use a product called Polyol 2000 in here instead of fiberglass, because it tends to do a stronger secondary bond. It penetrates, it's got the viscosity of water when you first mix it, and it penetrates really well, sets in minutes. So I'll probably use polyol in there. It's really good for fiberglass repair. And the rest of this looks remarkably good. you don't find too many upper fairings for a VF1000R that are this problem free, which is really nice. So that one shouldn't need a ton of repair work except for around that mirror support area, which is good. And the rest of it will be sanding and probably some spider cracks as we find them along the way. The lower fairing, two main areas of problem with the lower fairing. On this side, there's a bit of a battle scar right here, which is no big deal. And then, but right here, doesn't look like much, but that's really weak. You can, when I push that, you can see, I think you can see it kind of flexing there. See the light changing as I push on it? It's basically cracked right through from this side to the back side. You can see it in here. That's where it's broken through. So that there's absolutely no rigidity left in that fiberglass at all. So that will have to be ground down on both sides, and I'll use some new fiberglass cloth or mat in there with polyol to reinforce that. And this side is bad. So there's a whole section missing. This should be in here, like this. So there's a whole piece missing there of the duct on the inside that will have to be remanufactured. And then on this side, she's been sent down the road at some point, so there's a chunk missing off here that'll have to be repaired and refabricated. And this here, this is just a dog's breakfast. Somebody's tried to fix this before, so that'll all have to be, yeah, that's pretty bad. Not the worst I've ever seen, but still pretty bad. So yeah, the lower is in, you know, first glance it doesn't look too bad. Somebody actually had red sticky tape all over this, so you didn't even really see it when I first looked at it. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna need a ton of work. You should never ever be surprised ever when you start working on the old bikes, and it doesn't matter whether it's Bodywork or anything else. If you buy an old bike and you get surprised by something, well, you didn't go in with your eyes wide open, because you go in expecting the worst, and if you don't find the worst, well, then count yourself lucky. But anything that's, you know, 30, 35 years old now, there's going to be a lot of history on these old bikes. So yeah, you expect everything. It's just the way it is. Okay, so here's the first steps I'm taking to fix this. So on this piece that was taped together, basically it was cracked. The top part was cracked, and the bottom, this is a factory installed support brace, I guess you'd call it. They just use like a welded rivet in here. So these two had popped off, and then this thing was kind of in half here. So I just tacked it and re-riveted with the soldering iron this, and I've tacked on the other side just a couple of spots where I've tacked these broken tabs off. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tack them on this side, and then I'm going to use Plastex to fill it in and fully repair it. This crack on the tail, so I get it nice and even, I'm going to clean off the backside, which is a bit of a mess here. I'm going to stitch it with the soldering iron, weld it, and then that way this outside edge is nice and smooth. I don't want to grind anything off on this outside until I've got the inside tacked. So once I get that done, I'll show you again. Okay, so here's the cracked tail piece. You can see it's kind of almost in two pieces there. So what I've done is I cleaned all of the crap off the back with some brake clean, and then I've taken the paint off the edge, kind of V-grooved it a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is, while I hold this tight together with I want to make sure that the outside here is kind of smooth, right? It's got to be flush, nice and flush, because you don't want to weld this stuff with it kind of off kilter like that. You want to make sure that it's dead flat, because if you don't, then you end up with, you know, tons of body filler way out here trying to get an even surface. So use your finger to just kind of feel that it's flat, And then I'm gonna, while I do that on that side, I'm gonna just stitch it on this side with the welding soldering iron there, plastic weld it, and then once it's all firmly in place, then I can use my plastics kit to fill it in, and then I'll V-groove the outside and do the same thing there. So I'm just kind of spot welding it here, just kind of stitching it. So it kind of, if you were to look at it closely, it'd just be like a, you know, what you think of as a Frankenstein stitch, where you just kind of put a flat weld across the surface. And all I'm doing there is it's just purely to hold it in the right place. Now you can actually repair the entire panel that way by going, obviously you don't leave gaps to do that, but so that's kind of what I've got going on there. Okay, if you've not seen the Plastex product before, that's the box there, and it's basically a liquid ABS plastic or liquid plastic repair. There's a number of different plastics it works on. There's a few plastics like polyurethane that it does not. So for instance, you cannot repair a dirt bike fender with it. There's a different product that they have for that. But for ABS plastic especially, it works really, really well. And the way that this stuff works, if you haven't seen it in my other videos, is you get this powder, which you kind of put in this little tray here. They give it to you in there's different size kits, but this is the one that I have. And then there's a plastics liquid. And liquid, you put in this little dropper bottle, and there's a needle, and somewhere down on the side here, I think right up here, where my finger is a little hole, and the whole idea is you let the drip of the liquid drop into the powder, and then you pick it up with the tip of the needle and you place it onto the repair area. Alternatively, with a larger repair, you could actually spoon the powder onto the crack and then just drip the liquid on. So I can probably show you a couple of different examples of that as we go forward. So I'm going to try to position this camera in a way that you can see what I'm doing. There, I just picked up the powder and the liquid on here, and then you squeeze the bottle again, and then you dispense it onto the repair area. And I find if you give it a bit of an extra squirt and make it really runny, it will penetrate the cracks really well, which is what you want in this kind of a repair. All right. So this is the section of the tail there that was pretty much broken right off, and I stitched it, kind of did that Frankenstein weld on the inside just to hold it in place. So now I just go with the plastics. I just start dripping it in there. And as I said before, once this dries a little bit, I'll just come along with a razor blade and shave the excess off the top, and then it just makes the sanding process so much simpler. And you can even get it to skin over by just giving it some heat from a heat gun. And that just stops it running. You don't need to heat it too much, it just allows it to skin over a little bit. That's what we need. Okay, so this next repair is going to be a little trickier. So this is the taillight surround, which, I mean, it's pretty, you can see why it cracked, right? I mean, or broke off. I mean, there's not much that holds this thing together. So I think the only way effectively to do this is I'm going to mount it inside the tail just to make sure that I get this back together at the right angle. And then I think I'll weld it, and then I'll likely have to weld in a support on the inside just to make sure that it stays in place properly. Because with something so thin, my concern with this is, like, plastic welding works very well, but when you've got such a very small surface area and you're using the technique and the tool that I have, which is basically a soldering iron, there is a potential for the plastic to be a little more brittle. It's not as big of a problem, I find, with larger repair areas and larger cracks because you have a whole lot more surface area. But when it's very, very small, like this, yeah, it's possible it could crack again because it becomes much more brittle. So I'm just going to start just welding it in a little bit, and then we'll let it cool before I let go. And again, I'm just using my finger on the outside, making sure that I don't burn myself. It's getting pretty hot now, but I want to make sure I'm keeping the outside edges of this stuff lined up properly. I ground the paint off the edges just to make sure I get kind of good adhesion there with the welding. You don't want to leave the paint on. And the whole idea here is that ideally I want to go 50% of the way through the plastic on each side, so that way I get full penetration. Okay, so there is the reinforcement that I put around the inside here. So I just tack welded that on, and then I used plastics to fill in the entire underside to make sure that it gets properly bonded to the actual panel. So I put one on each side, and then once that's kind of hardened on there, I'll sand it down to make it look all nice and smooth. At least it'll help to make that sturdier, and still allows the panel to fit inside this recess here. It doesn't interfere with that. Okay, in the next section I'm going to try to replace, on that piece I was just fixing, these corner pieces right here where my thumb is, they're completely missing on the other tail section. So I'm going to use this other tail piece to make a mold. And what I have in this tray here is the molding bar from the plastics kit, which you basically have to heat up, and then you can mold it into any shape. And once it's cooled, you can pull it off and apply it to the piece you want to repair, and then pour the plastics powder and liquid into it. Leave it for a day, and then before you know it, you've got a nice, perfect ABS plastic repair. So I'm going to basically take it and I'm going to form over the edge of this piece here. Form it over as far as I can. Give myself enough. So I want to make sure what I have. I want to cover the entire piece that's missing, plus enough to be able to grab onto the panel that I'm going to fix, right? So right around the edge here, I'm hoping is enough room to fit onto the panel I'm fixing, and then all the shape that I'm getting, the front leading edge here, including the hole, is the part that is gone that I'll use as the mold. And of course I want to be able to this is not a perfect piece, because even on this one, the inside here is broken away, but I can still work with that. It'll be fine. There, we'll let that cool off. Once that's cooled, I can take it off and apply it to the other panel. Okay, so this is the broken piece that I'm going to use the mold on. So what I've done here is I've chamfered the edge back. So what I don't want is like just a clean cut edge. Let's say that'll represent kind of a clean cut edge, even though it's not cut. What I want is I want it chamfered back on both sides as much as I can, not just to get the paint off. See, this here needs more. It's just too clean of a cut there. That needs to be paint needs to be removed and the edge chamfered back more still. So there's the plastics mold that I took off that other tail section. So now I should be able to just transfer it over to here. So what I'm doing on this one here is I just spooned the plastics powder in there, and now I'm going to just kind of dropper this stuff in here, right on the top of that powder. And then I'll have to do this several times. It'll take a few layers to get it fully filled in. And then this is what it looks like with that front section repaired with the mold. So that's after the plastics has dried, and I just popped the mold off it. So that came out pretty well. And so there's the mold again. So I'm going to heat that up now, and I'm going to put it on the other side. And in the meantime, I'm going to grind this, and then we'll repair it again. Okay, so while that other piece is drying, my next task is, I think I'm going to try to take this giant piece that snapped off and reattach it to here. Once that's attached to there, then I'll be able to start to refabricate this missing bridge piece. You look on the inside. So first thing I'm going to do is fix that crack that hasn't cracked all the way through yet. Fix it on the back side first, because that way I can make sure that it's nice and even and lined up here. And then I can, once that's done, I still have to grind off the paint on this inside, and then we'll get that attached. So there's the whole piece that completely cracked off has been reattached. And again, all I've done so far is just kind of done I just call it the Frankenstein stitch, just to tack it all in place. And then on this side, you can see I haven't done anything at all. I haven't even ground it out, and the reason for that is, again, just to make sure that I can feel it to be relatively smooth and even. Because if you grind this side out, then you really don't know how smooth it is. So anyway, okay, so here's the outside, and here I had to get really aggressive with the grinding, because this was a complete clean break in half. So the idea here is I've kind of taken this back quite a ways, ground it fairly deep, because I'm going to use the plastics because it's going to be, I think, better penetration on there, and should be sturdier, I think, than just the plastic welding, with it being a complete clean break, which word it would be too brittle. So we're going to plastics that, and then we'll see how that ends up looking when it's done. Okay, so the next piece I'm making is this I'll call it the bridge section, and because of the shape of this, it's kind of lower here, then it kind of rises up a little bit here. So I'm going to make that in two sections. Again, this is all rough, it hasn't been ground down yet, but that's the first piece. It'll have the hole in it like that, and then I'm going to create the next bridge piece to join this together with that, and then we'll put in a reinforcing section underneath, just like they did from the factory. All right, so there's the rough repair done. Obviously nothing has been smoothed out yet, but basically that's the shape of it. Once I get it all smoothed out, it will look just fine. And under the back side, same sort of thing. It's been say sort of spot welded through, and I'm probably going to run some plastics in between the gap on the two of those pieces as well, so that way it's extra strong. Okay, onto the repair of the solo cowl. So I've already done the major crack repairs, so they're welded and plasticsed. And then now I got to start filling in these missing pieces. So here's a piece of an old Honda fairing. So basically what I've done is I put it underneath, I traced around it, and then I've cut it out. So that's going to go in there. So, all right, so there's the new section. It's been welded in. I kind of spot welded it on the top. It's been fully welded underneath. Needs to be profiled a little bit, but that's okay. All right, so there's the plastics. It's been dripped onto the top. So once that dries, we can set about grinding it and finishing it. There's a couple of other chips in here that I'll just probably just put some plastic weld in with a bit of fairing in there. So all right, so here is the mold for the tab. Took that off the other one, so that will basically just clip right over here. All right, so there is the mold attached to the tail section. So now I'll fill that with plastics and we'll be good to go. Okay, so there's the rough repair. Obviously that still needs a little bit more work and shaping and whatnot. This one's actually a little bit better. But that's just as basically right as it comes off when you take the mold off. And then like anything else, you've got to work it and smooth it and sand it and make it look better. So those are done. I did do one of the rear that has not been trimmed in any way, shape, or form yet. I've got another one there that has been cast but hasn't dried. It actually looks pretty good from the back side, so you can see before it's all trimmed off. That's how it looks. That's the black part that you see there is all plastics. It was just sheared right off. So once I get the castings trimmed off there, that'll be great. And then also this section here, this was actually bent out to here, like it was out here quite a ways. So I had to heat that up, bend it back, weld it in place, and then this section here was missing completely. So I took a piece of fairing from another bike that I had laying around and just I tacked that in, welded it in, and then I put some plastics in there as well, so that that'll be good. There's a crack here at the top as well. There's cracks everywhere. I'm still finding cracks. All right, so the nice solo cowl is here. So now I'm taking the mold off that. There's the molding bar on there, and then so I'll do them one at a time. And then the other thing that I realized that I have to do wasn't immediately obvious to me, but it's been a long time since I've seen one. This whole piece is missing off of here, so I'm going to have to make one of those as well. Right, so there's the first repaired corner of the solo cowl, and that was modeled off this one. And now I've got the second one is now setting in the molding bar, and then I've made a new seat pad support. It's kind of, I've got some plastic setting in the bottom of there. I had a brand new piece of ABS plastic in there, and so that's the first stage of that repair underway. Getting there very slowly. Okay, so I've just made these raised bosses on here just to mimic the original. Just kind of a raised area just to make sure that it looks as close to the OEM as possible. So once that dries, that'll be kind of the crude repair, I'll call it, done. So all of the major cracks and missing pieces will have been fabricated on there, and then we can get on to the fine finishing, stripping off the decals, sanding everything, filling, priming, and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, turned out pretty well. Now I got to finish the tail section. It's got hundreds of spider cracks. Okay, so dealing with the spider cracks, and there are a lot in this tail section. So this tail section is the one that was severed in half completely, missing bridge, blah blah blah. So what I find is the easiest way is to kind of go over, when I find a spider crack, I just take a Sharpie and mark it. That way I know, one, that I've found them all, and two, it's just easier to grind the lines out when you've marked them with a Sharpie pen. So there's some on that side, and then there's all kinds of them on this side. So yeah, that's the plan. Hit it with the Sharpie, hit it with the grinder, put the plastics in, and then I think that one should be good to go as well. Okay, so onto the upper fairing, and As I mentioned, this is in pretty darn good shape for an old upper fairing fiberglass. It's really good. So for the most part, there's it's this area here that needs the repair. There's a couple of other little spider cracks elsewhere, so you can see them up here if I wipe those off. So these will have to get ground out as well, because otherwise they'll just come back. So what I've done here is I've just ground through the body filler. So yeah, that's factory body filler. That wasn't repainted. So through the filler to the fiberglass. And then what I'll be doing there is I'll use the product called Polyol 2000, which is a two-part polyurethane epoxy. When you first mix it, it has a viscosity of water, and then it sets up in, depending on the ambient temperature, it could be anywhere from 2 minutes to 10 minutes, let's say. And this time of year, I'll probably get 10 minutes out of it, but it thickens continually through the process of working with it. So when I want to penetrate this sort of stuff and get into the cracks in the fiberglass, it penetrates really well when you get it in immediately. If you wait a little longer, it gets a little thicker like fiberglass resin, and it doesn't penetrate the original old glass as well. So that's what I'll be doing with that. There's still a couple of little cracks there to grind out, so I'll do that. But yeah, overall this is pretty darn good shape. Okay, so here's a view of the damage to the lower fairing after some grinding. Still not done yet. I'm basically this has really just been taking out all of the damaged stuff, as well as then inside. Just started again to grind some of that back. Still obviously more to grind away there before I can repair it. The other side, as I got looking closer, the inner duct here is broken clean away from that, which should be fairly straightforward to fix. And then here, spider crack. I have to remove the decal there, of course, before I can repair that spider crack. And then this is the weak point in the fiberglass. There was actually a couple of spots where it was, hold the camera still, there. Really weak, really thin. All right, so this is Polyol 2000 urethane repair, and I use this on fiberglass because I have it here for one. I don't even know if you can buy it anymore. I think I've mentioned that before in one of my other videos, but it's basically, it mixes the same viscosity as water. It's a two-part polyurethane epoxy. You can kind of see how thin it is. And when you first mix it, it's really thin, so it penetrates really well, and it gives a stronger secondary bond than fiberglass resin. And by secondary bond, I mean if you're repairing old fiberglass, it's very hard for thick fiberglass resin to penetrate the old pre-resin, pre-hardened fiberglass that you would see on here. So anything like this, which is kind of, it's already been cured, it's hard for new resin to penetrate that, whereas polyol will penetrate that much more. The downside is, as I said, I don't think you can buy this stuff anymore, but it works really well. The downside to this stuff is it sets up wickedly quick, so you have to work in small batches. You have all your fiberglass cloth and mat pre-cut, laid out properly, so you know where it's all going to go, because I just did a batch, I just did some repairs, and it's set in, I'd say, 5 to 6 minutes. So yes, it's setting up pretty quick today. It's kind of warm in the shop, so you could actually put this stuff in the fridge and it will kind of extend your working time with it a little bit. But yeah, aside from that, you basically use it exactly the same way as you would use fiberglass resin. You soak the cloth. For spider cracks, it works really well because you can just kind of dip a paintbrush in there and paint any of the spider cracks that you've ground out with the mixed polyol, and it will penetrate into those spider cracks, and then they don't come back when you fill them with the body filler later on. So anyway, so it's basically a part A, a part B. You mix them in equal parts, and then you get to work. Okay, so this will be the last of the plastics molds that I have to make. So on this tail section, the bottom two tabs or clips are intact, but the top ones are broken clean off. And luckily I have the opposite problem here. So the top ones are intact, bottom ones are broken off. So this one, I'll take molds off the bottom and transfer them over here and recast them with plastic. Similarly on the top, I'll take the mold off the top of this and I will recast them over here with plastic. So I think once that's done, all the actual casting and main repairs are finished, and then I can start sanding. So that's going to be a long process of sanding and prepping these things, I think. All right, that's going to do it for this video. I'm not going to film any of the grinding and filling and sanding stuff. Nobody needs to see that. So the next video for this will probably be just before I head to the paint booth. So you can see everything is all prepped before it goes in, and then we'll try to get some footage doing the three colors and the clear in the paint booth. That'll probably be a 12-hour day. So yeah, stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.